just because I'm ready and y'all are ready and we're late. So I mean that to be whoever shows up is late. So my name is Cord Rawls. Right now I work maintenance here. I've done seasonal interpretation, which is doing programs like this, kind of talking to people about various things, as I like to say, interpreting the park to its visitors. I've done doing a greenhouse project. I do a lot of little stuff here, but I am not a full ranger. So Red Clay State Historic Park. Show of hands, how many people have been here before? Okay, it's a pretty good bit, not everybody. So Red Clay State Historic Park is very historically significant to the Cherokee people. It was the last capital and council grounds of the Cherokee Nation before their forced removal in 1838. There we are. So because that's what gives this park its context. I think it's particularly beautiful, but it's the historical context that really takes the cake. We try to stay close to Cherokee culture and tell about Cherokee culture, Cherokee history. We try to teach ourselves and spread what we've learned. So part of that tonight, we do have somebody coming up. Part of that tonight is a little bit of a disclaimer that I'd like to give, and I may give it again once these people come up because it's pretty important to me. I'm not Cherokee. I was born and raised in North Alabama. Not Cherokee. I learned most of what I know about the Cherokee people and their history and their culture. It's really picking up here at the park. I'm not telling these stories the way a Cherokee person would tell them. They memorize it word for word exactly how they were told, and they recite it. And y'all, I am finishing up a bachelor's degree in forestry, and my memory's just not that good without going to school. So I tell these stories more like, I guess, my culture. Americans would tell the story. We're Southern people, the rich culture that goes back on my own side. But these stories did come from a book. James Mooney was the author of the book. Got Myths of the Cherokee and Sacred Formulas of the Cherokees. Now, James Mooney, he was an ethnographer that lived in the Cherokee Nation after their removal. Oh, I got to go back just a little bit. More than just a little bit. I skipped a pretty important step. So the Cherokee people, for most of their history all of their history before contact, most of their history to date, did not write things down. It was an oral history. It was passed on. You can tell how important it was to them based on that their storytellers recite the stories as they were told exactly the way they were told. That fidelity is extremely important to them because they're from an oral history people. Now, most of the knowledge about what it means to be a Cherokee person historically, what it means culturally, the values, the social norms, all wrapped up into that, when that's relayed orally, it ends up really kind of getting banked in the memories of elderly people. Elderly people are like libraries in this type of culture, oral culture. The Cherokee syllabary had only been around for about 20 years before the Trail of Tears, and during that time they were focusing on the Trail of Tears. That was a culmination of history. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. It was a building pressure that everybody was concerned about and talking about, and they weren't writing their history down. So when the Trail of Tears happened, we saw a loss of 20 to 25% of the population, and most of them were the elderly and the extremely young. And so we see that loss of culture and history that went with them. The Cherokee people learned from this as soon as they got to Tahlequah, to Oklahoma. They took young people and the few remaining older people and just kind of cached as much as those young people could learn and memorize of what was left. There's a man named Swimmer that lived in the Cherokee Nation when James Mooney lived there, that told he was one of these kids. Swimmer was older by the time he started telling James Mooney everything he knew, but he was one of the kids that was taught all this. So we see this timeline to this book, and I'm pretty protective over the book because it's one of the few literary pieces that I know I can trust reasonably well. There's a few people that question it, a few people in the Cherokee Nation, but in general, most people are like, yeah, it's pretty good. So, that's my source. We carry it in the visitor center, which is closed at the moment. But. So, with that full disclaimer, for those that missed the beginning of it, I am not Cherokee. I'm not telling these stories in the way that the Cherokee people would have told them, but they are the Cherokee people's stories. If you hear a Cherokee person tell these stories differently, believe them. It's their story. So, I'd first like to introduce some characters. So the name of this program is Cherokee Cryptids, which is a little tongue-in-cheek. The Cherokee people didn't call the characters in these stories cryptids, but let's name a few cryptids. Blurt them out. Oh wait, first, do we know what cryptids are?
No.
Okay. People that are really, you do know what cryptids are. You just don't know you know. It's a new word that people are trying to make legitimize, I suppose. Bigfoot. That's a cryptid. Loch Ness, right? Or Chupacabra. Those are like really big, well-known cryptids. These creatures that a lot of people swear they have seen or heard or have almost proof of. There's really no solid evidence for, but a lot of people believe it. These are called cryptids. So these Cherokee stories, pretty similar. I don't know anybody that's seen them, but and for some, there's good reason for that. But it's still like this, some people have seen it, people know about it, kind of thing, but you wouldn't typically see, most people would never see one. Maybe they existed, I don't really know. So, in a tongue-in-cheek way to try to bridge the cultural gap we're calling it. One of these that's going to show up a few times, and so I've decided to kind of tell you all about it. It's called Little Men or Little People. Now, in Cherokee culture, they don't like to talk about little people. There's a belief that little people are a little tricky, but they also help you. Sometimes they show up and they really help you a lot, and sometimes they'll misplace your shoes or something. It gets pretty tricky, and sometimes they'll do more than that. They'll make you pretty sick or can lead to disaster, but they don't like to be talked about. So I'm breaking a rule there. I hope that any little men, if they're around and hear me tonight, can't do 60 miles an hour down Dalton Pike to follow me home. We'll see. So, these people, they live kind of underground, a lot of people believe. They're visible, but sometimes they let you see them. They'll show up if a whole village is sick, maybe they bring the cure. If you're having a bad day hunting, maybe they kind of tell you give you a tip where you can find a deer or a turkey. Or, you make them mad, they might trip you off a ledge. Like I said, they're pretty autonomous. So, with the little people introduced, we're going to move on to a precursor story to my favorite character, Tana. All right. So, there was a time when the son had a daughter. And these stories are pretty different than the stories we tell. So, Have an open mind, have an open heart, hang in there. The son had a daughter. The daughter lived in the ark above the ground at about the middle, about what we would call midday. She lived in a little house there. She never really came outside the house. And as the sun passed over the sky, she would stop in around midday to visit her daughter. And one day she told her daughter, I cannot stand my grandchildren. And we are people are the sun's grandchildren, to clue you in. So every time they look up at me, they scrunch up their faces and they make the most awful faces and squint their eyes and kind of bare their teeth at me, and oh my goodness, they just look terrible. I'm so embarrassed. I don't know why they do that. Well, we know why we do that when we look at the sun. The sun didn't know. The moon kind of chipped in at some point and said, we're the siblings of the moon. And said, well, they smile really nice and pretty to me. I don't know what you're talking about. But the sun's just like, I'm going to start over. Yep, that's the only solution. I'm going to start over. I'm going to kill them all. Pretty harsh. Pretty harsh. So she started hanging around midday, getting brighter and brighter and hotter, and just sending down the most like oppressive sun rays, and it started making people sick, and people started dying. She would stay a little longer every day, and eventually people were like, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep doing this. And so the little men, as I talked about, they kind of came up with a solution. They said, all right, unfortunately there's only one solution. We got to kill the sun. Once again, pretty rash, I'd say, but that was the solution. So they made, it's called the spreading adder and the copperhead. The spreading adder, I don't know what the Cherokee people were referring to with the spreading adder. Some people have said the hognose snake. Not sure. They sent these two snakes up there, and the hognose snake, or spreading adder, got really close, but the sun was so bright, it just got completely blinded and just sprayed venom in that direction, and it was completely ineffective, and it just kind of grossed the sun out. And it was like, I can't even believe this. The sun didn't even do anything, just kept going, and the snakes were so embarrassed they just left. They were so disheartened they left, and so the little people were like, all right, we're going to do better this time. And so they took this man who was apparently pretty impressive, and they worked some magic, they worked some medicine, they turned him into a tenna. Now a tenna is an impressive creature. It's a snake. He's as big around as a tree trunk. He's got this, some people say antlers, some people say horns, with these massive antlers or horns. He's got this gemstone, or the ulinsitic, right in his forehead. Huge snake. He's got 7 spots down his side. And one of those is pretty important. We'll talk about it later. And everyone was just like, oh, this is the creature for the job. Then they also met a rattlesnake. So they sent Uktana and the rattlesnake up there, and Uktana's, well, probably a little full of himself, maybe believes in himself a little too much, and the rattlesnake sneaks ahead and beats him there and crawls up outside of the son's daughter's house. And as soon as the son's daughter comes out, he strikes her and was like, oh, that's not the son. And Uktana was just so mad, so jealous that rattlesnake had beat him there, so mad that he beat him there and he messed up the whole thing, and he was so mad that he just left. He just went home. Long story short, on the son's daughter, she died. The Cherokee people, well, then the son went into her house and just refused to come out. And the people realized that was even worse. And so they saved her from the spirit realm, sort of. Didn't quite get her back home, but made amends with the son. The son recognized her efforts, and, well, now it's all as we know today. The sun's not making anybody sick, and thank goodness it's still up there in the daytime. So, we're going to follow our friend Uktana here. Uktana was so mad that he just made even more of himself. He like turned other people into antennas, but they weren't quite as strong. They weren't quite as angry, but they were still pretty dangerous. Eventually, the little people got together. It was just like, we've made a problem. And so they banished him. Now there's some mountains east of here. Pretty incredible mountains. They've got deep hollows and high peaks, very dense understory sometimes. It's a really, really good place to send dangerous things. Y'all have a guess as to where that is? What's your guess?
Cherokee?
It's got a lot of them. It's got a lot of them. Some of the biggest ones. Smoky Mountains. That's where they sung. So, the rest of the antennas, they kind of stuck around there. People avoided them. I'd avoid them. Now they say that all of them were usually seen in North Carolina except one. There was a man. He was alive today. I forget his name. He was part of the eastern band of the Cherokee.
Is it Brett Radley?
It could be. Certainly could be. He told our ranger here, Logan, that it's widely believed that there's only been one, and I'm not pulling Joe's leg. I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth. Only one seen in Tennessee. And if y'all have been to the park, you'll know that we've got a blue hole, a council spring down here. And that's where it was seen. I've never seen it, thank goodness. I wouldn't be working here anymore.
What's it called again?
Lieutenant. Lieutenant. And we're going to see him later. We're going to see our big boy Lieutenant later. But for right now, we're going to move on to a different snake called a stutchie. Now, who here is from Georgia? All right, have you been to Cahata Mountain by chance? There's a hill just to the southeast of the park. It has the very imaginative name, Big Hill. It's big. It is a hill. They weren't lying. And if that wasn't there, you'd be able to see Mount Cahata from here, or Cahata Mountain. But Big Hill's just being there. So there was a town on Cahata Mountain. And this town, it was pretty good. It was a pretty good Cherokee town. People hunted. They grew rice and beans. When visitors came, they would make feasts of meat, rice, beans, squash, all sorts of delicious Cherokee dishes. And that's exactly what happened one day. There was a man from around East Tennessee, North Carolina, and Cherokee territory that went down to visit this town on Cahata Mountain. And when he got there, everyone was so excited to see him. So excited, and so they made this feast. But there was kind of one thing missing. There was no meat. It's not necessarily uncommon, depending on your friends and family today. They may be vegetarians, but they weren't vegetarians back then. And they kept apologizing. I'm sorry there's no meat. I'm sorry we haven't been able to go hunting recently. And this man, he was a hunter. He finally asked, he's like, why? What's happening? You got all these woods? You got full of game? Like, what's going on? And they said, well, there's this terrible, terrible creature out there called a stutchie. He's an enormous black snake. But he's not just a black snake. He's got feet. He doesn't have legs. Just feet. It's really strange to think about an enormous black snake, and it's big enough. They were saying it's big enough to stretch across a valley, to like cling with his feet and stretch across this valley like a big inchworm. And it's weird to think of a big snake as an inchworm. It's like, that's not that scary. And so you think of it that big, it's pretty scary. They say he had triangular feet. If you ever saw his footprints, try to go the other direction and hope that you get it right. Now this snake, he would lift up his front end and he would kind of like look over the trees and try to find prey, find And he saw people as prey, 100%. But he would make this sound, bleating like a fawn. Little baby deer. To try to lure hunters closer. He'd lure them a little closer, and lure them a little closer until they were way too close to have any hope of getting away. They would lunge forward and just like take off through the woods, and you couldn't outrun him. He was way faster. Try to run straight up a slope to get away from him. He'd climb it way faster, and the hunter wouldn't come back. And so they stopped sending hunters off in the woods. This man, he was just like, maybe he was too new to be scared. I think I got this. Do y'all think he got this? No?
No.
Got some mixed reviews?
I think he's going to be okay.
So he goes, he takes a bow, he takes his typical hunting equipment, and they'd be out maybe for a few days. So he takes like some stuff to make a fire, he takes some extra food, takes something to hold water in. He heads out into the woods. And he's moving around for the better part of the day. And he hears this little small sound. Sounds just like a little fawn. He's bleeding off in the woods, and he immediately is just like, we've got prey. So he starts heading that direction. He remembers this is Stutchy. So he slows down and he starts creeping towards it much more carefully than you think you would after a deer. As he gets closer, he keeps hearing, and he keeps getting a little closer. Finally, he peeks just through some brush. And what do you think he saw?
The snake.
Yeah, he saw his Stutchy, and his Stutchy lunges, and he just bolts. He takes off running. He's running, and he's running, and his Stutchy's catching up with him very quickly. So he decides, just desperately, he takes off straight up the side of a mountain. Straight up, probably the side of Cahutta Mountain. And he's running as fast as he can, and he's slowing down, and the snake is gaining on him, just in bounds. Imagine if you were the size of like a single cell and this massive inchworm's coming after you, but this is massive and you might die. And he finally gets the idea. And he thinks about it. He's just like, he has to lift up most of his body to move. And so suddenly he just takes a hard left turn. And he runs laterally, kind of around the mountain. It's really, really, really steep. And so this snake is following him, and he starts, as he goes up to try to catch him, just kind of like falls away from the mountain a little bit, and he's not able to move as fast, right? And so he's gaining, or he's getting a good lead on the snake. And pretty soon, he doesn't really know where the snake is. And he can hear him kind of around, and he realizes the snake doesn't know where I am either. So he decides to creep down the mountain. He creeps down really quietly down the mountain, and he can still hear his Stutchy up there and see all the trees moving around, and he takes out his fire starter kit. And he starts moving along the base of this mountain, just making little fires. Now, something I've learned over the years is if you start a fire on the side of the hill, heat travels up, right? So does the fire. The fire just goes right up that hill. And so that's what starts happening. It starts circling this mountain, and the fire is starting to circle the mountain and go higher and higher. And the snake's going higher and higher. And pretty soon, he looks up there and he sees this massive fire just roaring up the side of this mountain. And his Stutchy, in one attempt, just tries to bridge over the entire thing, and he just doesn't quite make it. And so he goes back to the village, hopefully with some meat. Hopefully he found something on the way there, but I don't know, with a big fire, probably not. Editorializing a bit. He makes his way back to the town, and he tells them that the woods are safe again. But, I don't know. So, we're going to move away from snakes for a second. Good? All right.
Not a snake fan.
Not a snake fan. I like snakes, but I wouldn't like one that big and with feet. I don't know how I'd call it a snake.
Especially with triangle.
So-
Like call it an inch one.
She listens.
I'll just call it an inch one. But don't inch ones turn into butterflies or moths?
And who knows what his sushi might have turned into?
Maybe it'll turn into an Asian butterfly moth.
All right, so next we're going to talk about a different animal, Chanua. Now, Chanua, if you spoke Cherokee or Chalagi, you'd already know you'd already hear the story. But in the Cherokee language, Chanua means hawk. This kind of gives us a clue as to what this is. Big, big hawks. These massive hawks. Now, across the world, I'm saying the Philippines. I want to say the Philippines. I read a National Geographic article a little while back in which they found evidence of eagles' nests that had fed on small people. It's a long, long, long prehistoric time ago. And it might have been pre-humans, don't really know. But that's kind of what was happening here. These massive hawks. It's like they moved in, they came out of nowhere, and they started carrying off deer, and they were carrying off game, they were carrying off people's dogs, and they were carrying off people. That's not good. That's not good, y'all. And so the people, and this was pretty close to here, the people, they tried fighting back. They'd take their arrows, they'd take maybe atlatls, and they throw them it's at these hawks to try to get them to go away, and it would just kind of like bounce off. Didn't really seem to do anything, you know? So eventually, they're like, well, let's find out where their nest is. So they followed them all the way to the mouth of the Citigo River whenever it enters the Little Tennessee River. I don't know if y'all have ever been there. Well, that river's been dammed up, and it's still a little high right there. There used to be these cliffs. And right at the top of the cliffs, there were like these little caves, shallow caves. And that's where they were nesting. They would go home every night with whatever they had, and they'd feed their chicks up there. There was this medicine man that said, you know, we got to kill them. And we're seeing a theme here, is the way maybe why we don't see many Cherokee cryptids. We got to kill them. So, and people kind of objected at first. They're like, no, because if you fail, they'll be really mad, and it's not going to go well for us. They're going to retaliate. And he said, no, I have a plan, and he eventually convinced them. They went out and they made a bunch of linwood rope. Now, linwood is also known as basswood now. You can take the bark and kind of crush it up and make rope out of it. That's what they did. They made these massive, long rope, and they put loops in the ends. And he told them, all right, I'm gonna hold on to this rope, and you lower me off the side, and I'm gonna swing back and forth, right? When they're gone in the day hunting. So that's what they do. They start lowering them down. And pretty soon he yells to stop, and they feel the rope just kind of starting to swing back, forth, back, and forth. And he does that for a while, back and forth, until it's back and forth and back, and then he jumps, and he lands inside the cave. Right? And so he's in there, and he finds these chicks, and he's just like, well, I don't really know what to do. And he's thinking fast, and he's worried about these hawks coming back, these Chanuas. They'll surely rip them apart if they come back. And so he kind of panics, and he just grabs a chick, and he just throws it into the river. And he looks off to the side, and one of the smaller Octanas, if y'all remember them, happens to be in the river, and he comes up and eats the chick, and he says, well, I hope this will work. And so y'all, I'm not proud of him. He was not a conservationist. He threw every single one of those chicks off the side of that cliff. And that Octana ate every one of them. And then pretty soon, he just kind of like looks out, and he sees two distinctive shapes in the sky, and he realizes he's out of time. So he takes off running, and in a way that I imagine Tom Cruise would love to picture himself doing. He grabs this rope, and people feel the tug, and they just start pulling overhand really, really fast. And they get him up there, and they hide just in time because the Chinuas get close enough to see them when they get into their cave and realize all their chicks are gone. And y'all, they were mad. They were mad. And so they did the same thing that our medicine man did. They looked off the side of the creek, and they see this Uktana down there. And this poor guy just completely unaware, food coma, caught off guard, flat-footed, and they took off and they grabbed him and they ripped him apart. It's just destruction, they say. I don't know if it'd be true today after the river's been flooded if you could somehow drain it all back and see, but the rocks underneath those cliffs are streaked with red. And some people say there's iron deposits in it. But the Cherokee will tell you that that's what's left of the Uktana after that Chinua got a hold of them. So with no reason to stay, the Chinua, they just flew up into the sky, got higher and higher and higher, and well, the Cherokee people, by the time James Mooney wrote this book, they had not seen them ever again. Somewhere out there, there's some massive hawks. They might come back to the Citigo Creek someday. If you're out there, I'd watch the sky. And maybe watch for Bigfoot. I don't know.
He does that.
Oh, yeah, pretty cool. Pretty
He
cool.
lives in the woods.
So, in these next few stories, you get maybe kind of gruesome, kind of rough, more than the last few. So, I'd like to kind of give everybody a heads up. Little hitters here, usually tone it down a bit. But the nature of the story is going to be pretty rough, so discretion.
Or may I interject and add something about Chinua?
All right.
So, it's suspected. So, one of the things about Chinua is that it's described as like the great mythic hawk, right? It's also described as being metallic. And we don't really have a hawk species that necessarily looks metallic. So, it's led some historians and just folk culture experts to believe that maybe they're talking about a golden eagle. Because recent data, migration data from tagged golden eagles has shown us that golden eagles do often migrate well high above us through our area and through near where the nest was supposedly at. So that's something to think about. A lot of stories come from observations of things made in nature. So, could be great mythic hawk, could be actually a golden eagle. We don't really know.
What about a buzzard?
They're black.
They look sort of iridescent though.
Yeah, they kind of do. Turkey vultures have those sort of silvery feathers, but they're not aggressive. They're just scavengers. They're just nature's garbage men.
And golden eagles, they can
They
lift up smaller mountain goats.
They most certainly could.
They can fly off with some pretty surprisingly large creatures.
Like if you think bald eagles are big, golden eagles are much bigger. Like they
Much
are
bigger.
big birds.
Big birds.
But that's all I have to add.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going back to my
I
seat.
know where the
Thanks
biggest
everybody.
bird
Hi, I'm
is.
Ranger Taylor. Also nice to meet everybody.
Hey.
I was late to the party, so I didn't get introduced.
If you come by from most programs, Ranger Taylor's who you're going to meet.
I can script board to tell stories though. He's good at scary stories. I'm here for like the silly children's stories.
All right. So, next one, the Nunavut. Let me tell you all about the Nunavut. It's our first more humanoid. All right, so there was once a big hunting party. They go out, and during these times, it may be like a small roving village. There'd be several people that would go along if they were going on this long distance hunt they're trying to get a lot of meat together. You'd have several hunters and then like almost like support staff and doctors that would come along with, and just be like a small part of the whole town would go out on this an expedition almost. Sounds pretty cool. So this guy is one of the younger hunters. He's out kind of scouting ahead. They had stopped, they had made camp for the night. And they're up on top of a mountain ridge. And he's like, well, let's go out and see how far I can see and see where we're going tomorrow. What's going on? Scout around a little bit. And as he's out there, he looks down in the valley and he sees this human? Question mark? Down next to a creek. And this human, he's walking along kind of like he's looking for something. But he's got his walking stick. And he kind of like move it over here and bring it back and smell it. Wave it over here. Bring it back and smell it. And pretty soon, he kind of like waves it around in the young hunter in his memory direction of camp. He's pretty sure he smells of it. He's really interested. Oh man, he's really smelling of it like it's very interesting. He's like, just kind of made him uncomfortable, you know, like what is this guy doing? What is he doing? And pretty soon he goes over to the creek. It looks like he kind of waves his walking stick around. And he's on the opposite side of the creek, and it makes this stone bridge over the bridge. And he's like, oh, that's not good. Ah, you're right. I can't do that. And as the guy gets closer, he notices it's like he's dressed in stone. And so he runs. He's entirely freaked out. There's this guy. He's snipping his walking stick. He's waving it in the direction of camp, and he's coming our way. I should tell somebody about this. So he runs back to camp, and he finds one of the older guys. He's also a doctor or medicine man or witch, many names for the role. And he tells him, "Hey, saw this guy walking stick, bridge, strange, a lot of rocks on him," and then the medicine man, he gets real sober, and he's like, "That's Nunyunui." Literally means dressed in stone. And he's extremely dangerous. Don't really know what he is, where he came from, but he's kind of like a human, except that he eats humans a lot. All of us, if he gets here. So this is a bit of an emergency. They're like, well, how do we stop him? What do we do? And the medicine man, he's like, he's thinking about it. And he pauses, and he starts to tell him, and he pauses again. At least if it was me, he would start telling them, and he would pause again, and he'd be sitting in front of a crowd of people wondering just how to tell them, look, his only weakness is women in a certain cycle of the moon. Strange to say it, but that's his only weakness. He can't be around the phenomenon. Can't handle it. So everybody gets together, they talk about it, they recognize, like, well, I guess we gotta find some women that are in this time. And so they go back, they find Nunyunui, they can kind of see him moving along, and they figure out which direction he's coming from. He's on a trail. And they're like, all right, so he's going to come up this trail. So before he got there, they decided to go ahead and place these women kind of one at a time in intervals along the trail so that he would pass them. Sure enough, and then they go back a safe distance and they wait. And sure enough, he passes the first woman. She's pleasant. Says, hello. How are you? She knows who he is. And he and very rudely, and to quote the book, says, "Oh, my child, you're not well." You're a rude guy. So, but he shuffles along and he keeps going. He's ruffled and he keeps going. He gets to the second woman. She's getting cordial. Hello. She knows who he is. And he shovels past more, but she notices there's a little bit of blood that's just dropping just down his nose. What's happening? This carries on 3, 4, 5, 6 until finally he gets to the last woman, and at this point, our Nanyuno is not well. He's just trying to get past, and he looks up at her with a little bit of a smile. She knows who he is. Hello. And he collapses. And he's bleeding everywhere. He's just falling apart. And so at this point, he's weak enough. Everybody just kind of comes along, and the medicine man's just like, quick, stake him down to the ground. Some sourwood stakes. There's some symbolism in sourwood. I don't know it. I'm trying to find out, but it's tricky. Some sourwood stakes, they stake him to the ground. And they set him on fire, y'all. And so he's burning, and he's cursing them, and he's saying all these terrible things. And if anybody gets close enough while they're trying to stack wood, he tries to grab them, and he's unsuccessful. And then pretty soon, I want to say he realizes that his time is done, and so he starts revealing secrets and revealing all these sacred prayers and secrets and medicines that even our medicine man didn't have any idea about, for better hunting and for all this. And then with that, he passes away. He leaves behind some red wadi paint, just for sacred rituals, and an Ullin City stone. Now, do y'all recognize that name? Ullin City. Do y'all remember Octena? Right on his forehead, there was this Ullin City stone. It was supposed to be a magic stone that anybody that held on to it would be given to immediately understand all these secrets, and he would become the most skilled medicine man or doctor or witch around. So with that, he was gone. Nanyuno was over. However, Nanyuno wasn't the only stone-wearing monster. Now, Ochunta, or as she's known, and I've heard of a few people that have heard of her, was Spearfinger. Spearfinger was a Cherokee monster, a Cherokee legend, story, cryptid. Some say she was married to Nanyuno, but she was very similar. She was covered in stone, but unlike Nanyuno, which looked like a man, Uchunta could look like many things. She could shape shift, and she could really look like anything, but in her typical form, when she wasn't trying to look like something else, she looked like her grandmother. Which is the most chilling thing to me to think about. Maybe like covered in stone, but people were always like, she looked like a grandmother. She looked like a granny. But she would go, except for this one detail, except that her index finger on her right hand was long and hard and awl or spear shaped, like a spear tip or an awl. She would typically keep that kind of pushed down and hidden. You could see her sometimes traveling through the wood line with a basket, picking berries, picking strawberries. And if she saw you and you saw her and she saw you see her, she said, "My child, why don't you come over? Help me pick some berries. Let me share my berries with you." But the problem is Uchunta didn't eat berries. She ate one thing, and that was liver. And I've had chicken liver. It's all right. I've heard of people eating beef liver. She ate human liver. That is all she ate. So before you knew it, like a true monster she was, she'd be all over you and just completely dispatched. And then she'd be devouring your liver. Oh, I wonder what Cooper's up to.
Yeah, sorry, that's our neighbor. It's exciting to have the park, to say the least. So don't mind him.
Well, he might be on a chunta. I hope not. Man, I hope he's successful if he is. So,
Is it a dog?
a chunta?
I mean, no.
No, Cooper's a human.
Yeah.
He's a human man.
Could be
He's
young
quite the
dogs
man.
to come in. Who
He's,
knows?
he's pretty cool. I like Cooper. He's a little animated. Anyways, so Chunta, like I said, she could shape shift. So some people would say that you'd like go out for an errand. A family member would go out for an errand. Maybe they're going to see someone, and then they come back just a little earlier than you'd expect. And so they come back like, hey, yeah, went well, absolutely. And just as soon as you turn your back, because why wouldn't you? Been completely dispatched, and Uchunta's just devouring parts of you. Or sometimes some people would say that she could enter her house looking like a loved one, take everyone's livers without them even knowing, and be gone. And a few days later, everybody just suddenly grows sick and dies. Pretty incredible stories. The worst, the absolute worst, is just that she would look like a grandmother. She would lure you over. Sinister. So, of course, the people, I forgot to mention this, because to me, cryptids are tied to place. You always, just like, some people have seen things. I know what I saw. I've seen things. I know what I saw. I don't think it was a cryptid. I don't know what it was. But I remember exactly where I was. Setting and place is always a big deal to me. Bigfoot in Oregon, I guess, or everywhere now. The Cherokee Mountain is where people say that you're most likely to run into a Chunta. That's kind of her place. Cherokee Mountain, where it comes down to meet the river, close in East Tennessee. If y'all have ever been on a water level highway, going out to Murphy, you've been right through there. So eventually the people around there are like, we gotta do something about this Chunta. They would be out burning, the Cherokee people would burn the forest floor for chestnuts in the fall. They'd burn it off. The American chestnut used to, in some places, be 1 in every 3 trees. Extremely important food source for the winter. They'd be burning, and somebody would kind of go over here to be picking up chestnuts. And they wouldn't find all of them when they found them, when they came back. And that kind of gave somebody an idea. They're like, she always comes when we're burning for chestnuts. Let's start a fire in the woods, and let's make a trap. And so they make this fall trap. They dig a big hole, and they kind of cover it up real nice. You can't really tell it's there with leaves and stuff. And they're burning around it. And pretty soon, somebody sees kind of an old stranger. I don't really know who that is. They're like, I bet I know who that is. And so they kind of tried not to notice and position themselves with the trap in between them, and they keep going, and she keeps getting closer, and they're picking up and trying to ignore her, and I don't know how hard that would be. Sit there and try to ignore such a monster creeping up behind you, and you know it's there. They try to ignore her and keep their heads down, and pretty soon they hear, and she hits the bottom of that pen and starts yelling. She knew she had been tricked, and she is just roaring and screaming and shrieking. And they look down there, and she's clawing the sides and making, thankfully, very little progress. She is absolutely trapped. And so they're like, all right, quit. So they start firing their arrows, and they're throwing rocks and sticks. But do you think it hurt her?
No.
Why don't you think it hurt her?
There's stone.
She's covered in stone. And so, pretty soon a tufted titmouse, a little bird, comes by, starts singing its song, and to them in the Cherokee language, it kind of sounded like She's saying heart, heart, heart. And so, like, all right, so they try to focus directly, like right here to the chest, and nothing's happening, and they're like, and to this day, the tufted titmouse is known to the Cherokee people as a liar. Nothing happened. That's a little unfair because a chickadee comes along soon after. Now, what do you think the name for a chickadee is in Cherokee? Chickadee. The chickadee sings its name, so the Cherokee people, it's a little different. The Cherokee people named the chickadee after the song just like we did. The chickadee goes chickadee, 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 or when they're really excited they go chickadee, dee 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 dee, chickadee, dee 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 dee. So she's over there just deeing it up on a branch and pointing, and it looks like she's pointing at that hand, and that hand is out, and that awl is out, and she's just slashing. She is just in a frenzy at this point. And finally, it's still long enough, and somebody has the idea and shoots her straight through the hand. And that's where her heart was. In that right hand with her awl. And that did her in. She tried a little harder for a little bit longer, but she just couldn't make it back. I imagine they just filled in the hole right where she was. And that's it.
Where is the hole?
Where's the hole? Somewhere around Chihuahua Mountain, I suppose.
At the bottom of it.
And hopefully she's in it. So, we're going to go back to our good friend Uktena, and we're going to start wrapping it up. All right, so our good friend Uktena. Where's he at? Where's he been hanging out this whole time? In the mountains? Which mountains? Yeah, the Smokies. He's been out in the Smoky Mountains where all the dangerous things, not all the dangerous things, but all the banishable dangerous things are. So the Cherokee people, they warred with the Shawano people. The Shawano people we now know as the Shawnee, is their name now. They warred with them all the time. They told a historian, or not a historian, I'm sorry, a politician one time. The politician was like an American politician. It's like, why don't y'all try being peaceful? More peaceful. And the Cherokee people, they're diplomatic and they were warring, just like everybody else. And they kind of reasoned through it. And they're like, well, the creek, this is the creek. We kind of fight it along boundary lines, but that's really about it. We understand each other pretty well. We're peaceful with the Iroquois Confederation for the most part. Like, we got our smart. But the Shawano, we're never going to stop fighting the Shawano. Absolutely never going to stop that. And I don't know why. There's some bad blood there, but they didn't until the Shawano people finally left and went north and got protected by the Iroquois because they were a lot smaller than the Cherokee. But in one of these wars, they captured a Shawano medicine man. And they were going to do not nice things to that man. But the Shawano, and this is kind of the duplicity of the Cherokee Nation sometimes, they believed the Shawano medicine men were unmatched. Absolutely unmatched. And so they had a respect for the guy. He was way better than they were. And so when he said, look, what if I bring you the Olin City Stone? And at this point, he's talking about the one that Uktena has. And so they said, oh, you want to go fight Uktena? And he said, I think I can fight Uktena. And I can bring you back that Olin City Stone. And they said, okay, go for it. Absolutely, because the Cherokee people are absolutely terrified of Uktena. So they send a little small party with him to observe, and he goes up there, but he's got to find him. The Smokies are a big place. And so he's going all around the Smokies, and he's looking at every mountaintop. They don't know exactly where he is, and at some point, they find a particularly large snake. And everybody gets excited, like, is this him? And the Shawano man's like, this isn't him, because he knows Uktena. And they leave the snake alone. They go a little further, go to a different part of the Smokies. They started the north and they're working their way south. They come along this massive lizard in the trail, and all the Cherokee people are kind of scared of it. And Shawano met his man. He laughs. He's like, that's not Uktena. They keep going, and eventually they find an enormous frog, a massive frog in a creek. It freaked out the party with him, and he just kind of laughed. And they kept coming across these amazing large creatures that scared the Cherokee, self-admittedly, in the book. And he just kind of would shrug it off, chuckle, he'd laugh at them a little bit, and he'd keep going. And he looked all over, made it all the way south, and finally there was only one place that he's just like, he's got a hunch. So he goes and he finds this mountain. And I'm sorry, y'all, I have to look up the name of this mountain. I've been trying to remember. Whoop. Galunlati. Galunlati. He knows the place, and that's where he goes. He takes him with him. Pretty soon, he's climbing up the side of this mountain, and they're behind him. And have you ever tried to walk through dry leaves by yourself? Pretty hard not to make any noise, right? Now, what if you think that there is an enormous snake the size of a tree trunk with these antlers and a magic stone that is just the meanest thing that you've ever known about at the top? It would be kind of scary. Yeah. Now imagine there's like, we'll just say 5 people behind you climbing the same mountain. Pretty soon he looks back at him and he's like, hey, why don't you wait at the bottom? So that's what they do. They go to the bottom. They wait at the bottom. And he keeps climbing. He's just taking his time, being very slow, and he just peeks over the top of this hill as slow as he can, and he sees this massive tree trunk with a bunch of spots and antlers, just slowly breathing to the top, and he realizes he's found a lieutenant. The lieutenant's asleep. Now, this medicine man, he must have been quite the person, because they say that if you ever see a lieutenant when you're alive, you become so dazed by the Owen stone, you just walk right into him. It's not a matter of lieutenant's fast. It's not a matter of lieutenant's just absolutely just super strong. Probably strong, he's fast. You just never even have a chance. As soon as you see him, your will goes and you just walk right into him. And they say if you ever see him when you're sleeping, you can live through that, but you'll come home and you'll find your entire family dead for some reason. Our Shawano medicine man, he's a bachelor. Yes. No family, so he sneaks back down this mountain. He kind of climbs down real slow, back in the same tracks that he made, until eventually he gets far enough away and he takes off running. He counted his steps. He counts, and he gets a good ways away, and he starts gathering pine cones. And he starts making this massive ring. It's like getting higher and higher in a wall. And it's about Shawano medicine man size hole. Once it's really nice and big, he lights these cones on fire. And they start making this big fire up, right? He grabs his bow, he stills his will, and he clamps his teeth, and he goes right back up the side of that mountain. He gets to the top, and he slowly peeks over, and he notices that Lieutenant is looking around. He smells the smoke. He knows something's up. He's awake. He's looking around. So he waits. He counts the spots on the side. He counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because our Shawano medicine man knows something that the Cherokee don't know, and that his heart's right behind the 7th spot. So he waits, and he's patiently waiting. He's trying to stay as hidden as possible, and pretty soon, Lieutenant stretches out a little bit, and he looks away for just long enough for the men or hero to stand up. And he draws, he lets go. Can you hear an arrow fly? You can. You can hear the finger let go of the string if your hearing's good enough. And Lieutenant hears it, and he turns and he looks, and they make eye contact, and right into that spot. Lieutenant's not dead yet. Our man, as soon as he sees it go, he hits the snake, he jumps up and he takes off running, and Lieutenant's right behind him. Immediately. And he's slithering, and the man's running, and he's counting his steps, and he's counting his he still lose count. He's running and he's running. And Antenna's right behind him, but he's mortally injured. He's starting to get clumsy. And he's starting to kind of roll. He's starting to take out trees on his way down, and he's not sure if he's moving on his own or if he's falling, but he's moving towards the medicine man. And right as soon as the medicine man gets to his flaming fort of pine cones, he jumps, and he kind of flattens out. And as soon as he does that, Antenna just spews venom all through the air in a last Hail Mary. But the man made it just past the flames as the venom came through and sizzled. He lands in his fort, and Antenna tumbles right at that moment. Just rolls all the way down the hill, and he's taking out trees as he goes. Our Shimano medicine man, Agananichi, or Agananichis, there we are. He lets the flames die down a little bit. He ain't in a hurry. And he stands up and he walks down and he sees the body of the lieutenant. Not all lieutenants, but the original lieutenant. And there's the Lone City Stone. And so he calls all the birds in the forest to come feast, and they do it. It takes them a bit. Eventually he comes back, and the Lone City Stone is perched right on top of a limb where a crow left it. He took it back to the Cherokee Nation. And they treated him like a hero.
But if he touched it, then he has a power.
Yes, he did.
I thought snakes didn't have hearing aids, or
Oh, they do.
they do?
Oh, they do.
It really
They work differently, but they do. So, that was the last of the stories from the book. I have one more to leave y'all with. I'm not even kept up with the time. I'm sorry if I've been long-winded. The last one's short because it's one of my own stories. So if you're ever here in the early morning or in the evening, and you go down to the Blue Hole, to the Council Spring, it is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful places on this earth. It comes out of the ground at about 55 degrees, a little less. And so in the summertime, this hot evening, this is like a cool atmosphere down there, and it's fogging because it's taking all that humidity down to the water. And in the cool of the morning, the water's warmer, and so it's steaming up a little bit, and there's still fog either way. It's just absolutely beautiful. And one day, towards the end of my season as an interp ranger, a seasonal interp ranger, been a long day, a lot of programming, and I'm just standing down at the edge of the Council Spring, down on the stream side. And it's quiet, nobody's in the park. I checked, up here, no cars, down below, no cars. We're maybe an hour out from closing. And I'm just touching the water, just ending the day. It was absolutely incredible and beautiful. One of the most peaceful things. And as I'm sitting there quietly, I hear just over. For those of y'all that have never been here, you have to come back and see it. You're kind of down in a bowl. Just over the rim of that bowl, I hear these small little voices, not saying anything intelligible, just almost like, I don't know, that sounds way creepier than it really was. I'm sorry. My voice is a little coarse, and it just didn't come out melodic at all. Kind of sounded like kids' voices. Like I said, but loud enough to where I should be able to understand words, but it was just nothing intelligible. I'm like, well, that was neat. There's nobody in the park. So I give it probably about 30 seconds. It's done. And then I'm curious, did I just hear that? And if anybody has ever seen anything you can't explain, maybe cryptid, ghost, spirit, unknown, you know that feeling of just maybe 2 minutes after, immediately, did I just experience that? I don't really know. I did. So I go up top, sure enough, nobody there. Not a single soul in the place. And, you know, typically, you're alone and things like that happen. It can be kind of scary, but it was like it was just a peaceful, welcoming feeling along with it. It was really nice. I like that. I've told a few people, few people that are Cherokee, and pretty much everybody says, like, oh, it could have been a little person. Don't know. Guess it could have been. But, y'all, this kind of concludes it all.